Hello and welcome to the Smash Your Own Ceiling podcast. Today we have the amazing Jackie Hill. Welcome, Jackie.
Well, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm really happy that you're here on this very rainy Friday morning, and we've both got our cups of tea, and yeah, it's a bit cosy. I'm feeling quite cosy today. I don't know about you. So Jackie, you're a member of my Smash Your Own Ceiling Academy. So we've known each other before then, but this is where we really kind of got to know each other properly, I think. Would you agree?
I agree, yes.
And it's been an absolute delight working with you. So that's why I wanted to get you on this podcast, because I think you've got a fantastic story to share that so many people will really resonate with and benefit from. So as with all of my guests, I ask everybody to pick a starting point in their life that you want to just kick us off and just for us to kind of springboard from there. So what's this point for you?
Well, this month, this time 10 years ago, is where probably my story starts. In 2011, I was working in the corporate world, and I had a few tragedies. My father had died, various things had happened, and I found myself quite burned out for one reason or another, and I'd been told that I needed an operation. Not a major one, nothing too exciting, but it was still surgery. It still abdominal, and it was still surgery. And it kicked off a chain of events in my family that made 2011 pretty tough going. I had to come out of work very quickly, hand over all my work very quickly. Within 2 weeks, I'd been on a major program of work. I'd had to hand it over very quickly. And I went to stay with my mum, who wanted to look after me. And my mum has, it was the best place for me to go, actually. I was living in a rented house. It wasn't the sort of place where I really wanted to be poorly in. It was, 3 months, 6 weeks off work and all that sort of stuff. So I went to stay with my mum. And due to the stress of it, I didn't have the operation on the day I should have had it. I had it 2 weeks later. I caught a bug and they wouldn't operate. They thought I had norovirus or something, so they sent me home for 2 weeks. Anyway, during that time, I stayed with my mum. I stayed off work, and they were very good with me at work. But my mum started to go downhill, and she has episodes of clinical depression. So I ended up in a situation where I was staying with my mum, and she couldn't cope with her daughter being ill, because she looked at me to be the strong one, and the strong one, and I suddenly wasn't able to do that. So we ended up in a horrible dance all over the year, where I had my operation, but my mum ended up in psychiatric hospital. And the operation, my operation went fine. It was nothing, it was uncomfortable, but it was an operation, and it went all right. But in that whole year, the dance between my mum and I, and the codependency between us to get her well and to get me well, it just went on. And my mum didn't actually come out of psychiatric hospital until the October time. And in the meantime, I'd have to go back to work. And I went back part-time. I was working all over the country. And I was just exhausted. And also I was living in a house that, whilst it was nicely done out, it wasn't nurturing me in any way. It was rented. I'd sold my house 3 or 4 years before. I hadn't found anywhere where I wanted to be. So I wasn't really being supported. And I didn't have a partner, or so I was very much left on my own devices to sort it out. So that's kind of where it started. And after that, I realized I couldn't keep going in the corporate world. It was still 3 or 4 years later that I left. But towards the end of, as my mum went through that process, I realized I needed support. It wasn't her, it was me. So I then put my hand up and I said, I need some support here. I needed some counselling. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, they say that when the time's right, the teacher appears. and the right person appeared. And then we started to do some digging, and we went through the lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always known I needed counselling. I never thought I needed coaching, but I knew I needed counselling. And it went on, and it was such an interesting experience. You know, I found it fascinating to have somebody to talk to. It was such an interesting process to see how all the layers came off and all the digging got done. And I thought I'd fall apart, but I didn't. A friend put it not that long ago. He says, "You've just been slightly rewired, haven't you? It's all the same parts, they've just been rearranged into different areas." I think it's a bit like taking an engine apart. You know, you go and sort of re-oil all the little bits and pieces and then put them back in again. And that started the realization of how far I'd really just not looked after myself at all. I was just surviving, and I was just hanging on. So that was where it started. And that's the anniversary of that's well, actually, yeah, the operation was this March, 10 years ago. So that's where that happened, and I stayed working and got better over time. But I think eventually with corporate life, my values and the way I was working and how I was working, they were no longer a match. I just had to do or find some other way. So it took me quite a long time to get through that process, and I felt like I was in the trenches. I just could not get out. I just felt everything was imploding on me, and I was really struggling, but valiantly fighting. I felt like I was a hedgehog with everything, all the little soft parts were inside, and I was just, you know, rolled up into a ball, all the prickles on the outside and all the pain was on the inside. And I thought, just get me out, I can't do this anymore. So it was with some relief that I left in 2014, and for that I knew that I needed a sabbatical. I needed to take a good year out to decide what I was going to do after that. And for that, the main thing for me was I just needed to be my own person. I needed to be my own boss. I needed to make my own decisions. I felt so compromised in corporate life that I felt that I was being shoved into a little box and being turned into something that I wasn't, or always tried to be shaped into something different. And so that was, it was a relief to come out. And then it all came out physically. I couldn't, you know, my back had seized up. It came out physically. I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. So then I got to the point, well, what am I going to do for work then? So how's this going to happen? And I had been in corporate life. I'd gone in as a secretary, and I came out as a management consultant, and I'd never been to an interview, and I hadn't done any of it. And I thought, wow, what am I going to do? But I was a project manager, so I knew about the contracting world and worked with a lot of contractors, and so that was how I set myself up to be a contractor, and that's how the business first started.
Fantastic. Such a good start to your story, Jackie. So much in there. And what I'm curious about, I'm going to just go back a step, if that's all right. I'm really curious about what you said. Obviously, you left corporate, which is fine, but you wanted to find you again. You wanted, you had, these are my words, not yours, but you had to be centre stage, if you like. You had to, you know, really look at yourself first. So what did that look like for you? I know you had, you left with an inkling of doing that, but what did success look like for you in terms of finding yourself at that point?
I don't think I realised just how much of me I'd given up. So I have a picture in my head, like when I left the job on the first day, and I was driving home on the A1, doing 71 miles an hour, as you do, in the fast lane. And I just remember thinking, wow, I've let somebody else drive my car. how, it's been everything else's direction. You've let me, and I'm perfectly capable of driving my own car. Look at me, I'm in the fast lane of the A1. I've been driving since I'm 18. I'm perfectly capable of driving my car. I can direct it wherever I want to go. But somehow I'd allowed myself to be the passenger in my car. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. And to find myself in a situation where I remember saying to my boss at the time, I said, it doesn't matter how hard I try, I will never, ever fit into your suit. It will always look wrong on me. The darts will always be in the wrong place. I will always be, I'm a woman in a man's world. And I would say to my shame, I'd probably forgotten how to be a woman in that sense, because I'd given up a lot of femininity, I think, in some of that. To not say that this is hard, or I felt like I was apologizing. And I know this is awful to say, but it's like saying, gosh, I've spent my life apologizing for not being a man, and really I should have been the best woman I could have been. That's an awful thing to say, to think, why couldn't I act more like the corporate wanted me to be, which of course is a more masculine element, isn't it? And it's like, why was I so emotional? Why had I shut down my emotions? Why had I allowed myself to be so compromised than the person that I am? And I just lost sight of who she was.
So here you were on the A1.
Yeah, the A1.
Down thinking, I've let someone else drive my car.
Yeah.
So how did you get back control? How did you get back behind the steering wheel once you'd left?
Well, I've always been very independent anyway. So it was about saying what is right for me. And if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. It was about doing the stuff that was less, we were talking this bit earlier, more creative, more intuitive, more. It was a side to me that I hadn't really explored. It was silly. I'd always discounted it as being a bit fluffy, and I thought, well, I need to do a bit of fluffy stuff. Is it fluffy? I started a huge journey of what I would call workshops on all kinds of things that I'd gone to yoga and thought, oh, this is a bit slow, this is very fluffy, isn't it? It needs to speed up and stuff. And I'd gone into meditation and things like this, and I was disruptive and I was noisy and I couldn't sit on the mat. And then I just went to workshop after workshop of various things that, and I met quite a number of people, actually. I think I started working a lot more with women as well, who were kind of rescuing me and pointing me in the right direction. So I thought, God, how do I let this go?
I love that. Because I can relate. I remember back in 2015 when I'd closed my first business and I was about to start my current one with my coaching business, and I felt like I'd lost my intuition. And I just felt like it was just completely gone. And I'd always been quite an intuitive person and I couldn't hear it anymore. So I had a whole year of, I called it my year of yes, where I did exactly what you've just described. I literally said yes to lots of things. So I went to yoga and I had, all sorts of, I could, write a book on everything that happened that year. But I love the fact that you started exploring parts of you that are just lay dormant, that you'd just left, that that you'd not touched.
Yes, and I think that some of the parts of that, it's not just the corporate life as well. A lot of it was my schooling as well that had pushed away a lot of the intuitive, as gone down more of an academic line. So for me, I just used to joke that if you could do this in yoga pants, that was fine. I'd go to these events. I would say that my hobby was workshops. Well, yeah, not doing anything today. What's this one about? And I used to quietly think, gosh, these people are really into angels and wow, really? And they've seen white feathers. I think, this is a bit fluffy, isn't it? But there were things that I went to, but I realized how much they were helping. And I realized a sense of community, because I'd also been very isolated as well. My job had made me isolated. I'd been working in hotels a lot, not in hotels, sorry, living in hotels and working away from home. And I'd only ever come home at the weekends, and my weekends were quiet. There was only me at home.
Yeah.
So I was completely disconnected from a social life of any type. And I had no time to do, yoga or Pilates or take an evening course or anything. And they were big wins for me, to just go to a class.
Mm. So
Um,
tell me more about this journey that you went through then. What did you learn about yourself?
what did I learn about myself? Wow. I learned to follow my intuition a lot more. I learned that my judgment was right. My judgment was better. I was always checking back on stuff. I still do it, actually, but I knew I was right on various things, and I knew what was right for me. So I had a bit more confidence to do that. I learned about myself. I learned That's a difficult one. I probably learned the negatives, actually, how much I'd allowed my confidence to slip and how much I'd given over.
Mm.
But I learned better about how to stand more in my power and
Mm.
stand about. And that when I eventually became self-employed, it allowed me to look people dead in the eye then. I think, come on, I know just as well as you do. I feel equal, and
Mm.
I am equal, and I should be equal. And at my age, I ought to be equal. So that was it.
And what did that feel like? What did it feel like to finally feel like an equal?
Oh, it felt great, and it felt great, and also to realize that it was only me holding myself back. It was my confidence that holds me back. And it made me feel taller.
Nice. I love that. I love that it made you actually feel taller.
Yeah.
So if somebody is listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm in exactly the same place, I completely relate to what you're saying. I appreciate that you went and tried lots of different things, and you gave yourself permission to explore different parts of you that you've not met before, maybe, or you just ignored or resisted. Is there anything that you would say was things that really worked for you to get you from that place of I need to know myself better to a place of actually I'm equal, I'm standing in my power? What were the in-between bits? What were the steps that you took?
Well, the big one that ran through it was the counselling and the therapy. That was the big one, and it was about allowing myself at that hour a week to spend on myself. And I think, and really going inwards and really querying what had happened to me and forgiving myself for some stuff as well.
Yeah.
Because one of the things my counsellor said to me is anything that's happened in your today has a hook into your past, and you need to follow that thread back down again. So I began to realise that some of the things that had happened to me, that in some ways was like I beat myself up for, I started to forgive myself, because I thought, actually, this goes back to here. I couldn't possibly have known, some of these things happened when I was a child. Some of these things were, and to realize that I haven't had an easy ride of things. And so to answer your question, how did I build going forwards? I started to do other things. For example, I did mindfulness courses, which was another interesting element. I learned more. I learned more about, I started on the personal development books and things like that. And I started to read more about mindfulness and mental health and actually Maslow. I did a psychology course, things I'd never been through at school or learned at school, and started to kind of forgive myself for stuff. And as each thing got, I started to look at each thing individually, I sort of let it go. There were so many anxieties that I was holding on to and fears that I was holding on to, that I learned that if I held them for just a little bit and acknowledged them and honoured them a little bit, I could let them go. And that has helped a lot. And then suddenly the neural pathways, if you like, my mind would go down an old loop and suddenly it'd end up in a full stop. And I think, oh, I've forgotten, it's gone. And so it was a question of release, I think, of a lot of it. Might not be quite where you were going with that, but it was just a release.
All good, yeah. So I love the act of just forgiveness. You know, I think that's it's so powerful, isn't it? Just forgiving yourself, and we're not condoning anybody, you know, their behaviour, but we're just forgiving it and letting it go. It's not something that we're going to carry around with us anymore. So you're here. We've got to present day, Jackie. You're now an equal. You're standing taller. Tell me more about what today looks like for you in terms of how you finding yourself.
So in terms of today and finding myself, I think that I'm at a very I think it's a very interesting period that we're in now, because it's post-pandemic, and well, nearly post-pandemic.
Yeah. Well, touch wood, yeah.
Post-pandemic
we're still in it, aren't we, at the minute? As we're recording, this is what month are we in now? February 2021. February 2021.
So post-pandemic, I have to say that the pandemic's been quite interesting for me, probably because I've done the work that I've done through therapy and through all these workshops and everything else. To my amazement, I have actually coped with the lockdown and pandemic far better than I thought. I haven't had the depression, I haven't had the anxiety. Maybe I'm in a better personal position than I was 10 years ago, and I am. But I'm amazed that I haven't had the anxiety. I actually see this as an opportunity. I see this as something that had to happen, and it's a great opportunity for the future. And I actually think that it's blown so much stuff out of the water. It's going to change us radically going forwards, and I think that is fantastic for all the reasons that I've just mentioned before about corporate life and everything like that. It has to change. We have to put health at the top of the agenda now. We have stuff that, for example, you know, I thought I'd be retiring at 60. We all thought we'd be retiring at 60 or 65. I realise I won't retire. I realise that it's just moving on to a next stage. All these established things, you know, milestones that we have had set in our lives are blown out of the water. We can do whatever we want now. And I'm hugely excited for that. And although I've painted a bit of a depressed last 10 years, my view is, well, how can I help people go forwards with this? You know, we've got the young people for the next generation of stuff, and far be it from being over for them. I think, crikey, this is great. You're getting a completely blank piece of paper to work from. And, you know, going forwards, where I am at with that is, how can I help? How can I support people to do that? How can I support people's well-being by using my experiences to help them? You know, I just think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm excited by it. And I have been right since the beginning of the pandemic. I know it's been tragic, but it is tragic. But it's the change that we needed.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you're reframing it to make it much more of an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And that you're really embracing that change, which is fab. Right, Jackie, we're going to change tack a little bit now, and I'm going to do a quick fire round. This is where I literally ask you any questions that pop into my head, no matter how random, and we'll just see what pops up. So let's have a think. Favorite hobby right now, what is it?
Oh, well, that's been astrology. That's astrology. And that has been a newie for me, because you know, from everything I've just mentioned before, astrology, well, that's away with the fairies, and I love it. It's been far more accurate than anything that's come out of the BBC or Downing Street. It's been brilliant. Love astrology.
Fantastic. When was the last time you really stretched yourself and did something that you didn't think you could?
Well, that was probably when I ran a new masterclass last year.
Mm-hmm.
That was pushing me, because that has been something that, again, I embrace, because it is the new ways of working, if you like. So I'm an old dog that's had to learn sort of new tricks, sort of thing. So it's made me learn about the social media. It's made me learn about stuff in the background and the nuts and bolts of putting things together. So, for example, in 2000, I pretty much, or maybe just before 2000, I pretty much put my feet up and didn't want to get on with the internet. And I remember my boss coming out of the room saying to me, you know, can you print this map off of this hotel on the internet? And because I'm going there. And I said, well, can't I just turn to page 89 of this book and photocopy it for you, because it's a lot quicker? And I thought, oh, I don't want to go on the internet. It's too hard. I'm now at this point where, yeah, okay, I got over all of this. But now I'm having to start again, and I'm looking at it again, oh, I don't want to do social media. I don't want to do this. I just want to retire, give up. And so it's pushing me into the next stage of the evolution. And we all need to keep moving forwards, even if some people like me go kicking and screaming.
So I'm intrigued then. What do you do to get over that resistance? So when you are kicking and screaming, how do you actually get yourself out of it?
Well, my default strategy is I probably drive myself over the cliff, actually, which I don't think is very healthy. And that is probably where my problem is that I will just, it's a little bit like I will just push myself over and make myself do it. It's like there's another head on my shoulders, if you like. It's the one that, it's the work head, where there's a deadline, and whether I like it or not, I'm going to have to make it over it. It's not that nurturing. I'd like to find a more nurturing way of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just drive myself off the cliff. It's not very helpful, is it?
Yeah, but it seems to work for you, which is, you know.
Well, it's different ways. It's different ways of doing it. But I think the other thing that I've learned from doing that exercise last year was the fact that a little bit more preparation, probably, and an acknowledgement that I find some of this hard, and again to realize where that comes from, and to allow myself to say, yes, this is hard, yes, it's okay, it is fine, it is a stage of a process. I think that's something I had to learn. It's not just throw yourself off the cliff. It is a stages, and the incremental stages will make me deliver it.
Yeah, definitely. It's all those tiny steps add up, don't they? Okay, last question then, Jackie, and I ask everybody this question. Have you had a particular book that's impacted you that you'd recommend to anybody else?
Okay, so the books that I had, that I had was, Brené Brown was a massive influence when I first found her. I think I found her on her TED talk on vulnerability, but you know, she has Daring Greatly, Dare to Lead. I think it's called Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead, I think.
Dare to Lead, and she has that wonderful quote about the man in the arena, and I forget how it goes, but it's the man in the arena. It's the person that dares to stand in the arena time after time and get up and keep going. And so it's been a big influence to me in making me keep going, in all her many books of common sense. And she also says that she's a Texan, and she's a 5th generation Texan, and she shoots from the hip. And I think, you know what, you Texans, you like us Yorkshire people, because we're dead straight as well, and we shoot from the hip.
We do. And I love the fact that you call it, you described her books as common sense, because that's exactly how I describe it. It's just fab, but it's straight talking, common sense, tells you what you need, and it's brilliant. So we will put some links to Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, I think the one that you chose. What was the second book then? You said books.
Well, I had another book, and it's called The Right Brain Business Plan by a lady called Jennifer Lee. And I picked this up in 2014 when I was looking at how I was going to work. And I think it was the book is pretty much written in, it's about how to design your business in a creative way and to use your right brain as opposed to your left brain. So what I liked about it was there was no Excel spreadsheets about it. She called the finance book about, managing the moolah. And it's like, okay, let's just turn all these words on their head and design something where, yes, it is a business plan, but I can do it in colored pens and pencils. It doesn't have to be on a sheet of A4. It doesn't have to have PowerPoint. It doesn't have to have this, that, and the other. I can get to this same thing, but I can crayon it. and it just made me think differently and acknowledge that there are other ways of doing things.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. What did you say that last book was called?
The Right Brain Business Plan by Jennifer Lee.
Brill. We will put the link to that underneath this this podcast as well in the show notes. So where can people find you, Jackie?
They can find me.
Mm-hmm. They want to look you up. Where can they find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn under Jackie Hill. My company is called Perigee Moon Limited. It is an evolving structure. I'm working on resilience at the moment, because what I really want to do is share what I've learned over the last few years, particularly around how I managed the workplace well-being and how it could change with that, but also the resilience and the things that I've learned along the way, not just over the last 10 years, but over the last many years.
Brilliant. Fantastic. We'll put all the links on the show notes as well underneath this podcast. Jackie, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. I've loved chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.